Welcome back, everybody. Today, um, we're going to be kind of going back in time a little bit
Okay.
to Tudor England.
Right.
But don't worry, we have a fantastic guide with us to help us navigate this world, and that is, well, we're going to be talking about C J Sansom
Yes.
and the legacy of C J Sansom,
Yes.
the author who brought us this incredible character, Matthew Shardlake.
That's right.
So, welcome.
It's the pleasure to be here.
I'm so glad you're here to help us break all this down.
Absolutely.
Sansom's work, I mean, especially, I guess, his 7-book Shardlake series,
Yeah.
was really, I mean, it wasn't just crime novels, was it? It was like immersing the reader
No, it wasn't.
in this world where the stakes were incredibly high.
Right.
And you know, just to think about the era that he wrote about,
Yeah.
you know, a time when your religious beliefs could change overnight with the king's decree.
That's right.
And those shifts determined whether you lived or died.
Absolutely.
That's the Tudor era that Sansom just captured so brilliantly.
He really did. And it's interesting, I was looking at some of the research about him and how really what he was doing was almost single-handedly creating this genre of political, historical crime fiction.
Yeah, because it seems like before him, you know, historical mysteries would focus on the individual crimes.
Right.
But he took it a step further
He did.
and weaved those crimes into the political fabric of the Tudor court.
Exactly. He wanted to show how ambition and betrayal and these power struggles,
Right.
could be just as deadly as any dagger.
Yeah.
Really.
Right.
And I think one of the things that he was trying to do was make us realize that history is not just dates and battles.
Yeah.
It's actually this tapestry of human lives and choices and consequences.
Yeah, and speaking of choices, what an interesting choice of protagonist he gave us.
Yeah.
Matthew Shardlake,
Right.
this lawyer working in a world that is so obsessed with appearances,
Yeah.
and yet he has this hunchback.
He does.
So he's immediately, you know, an outsider.
He is an outsider from the very beginning. And, I think Sansom uses that so brilliantly.
Absolutely.
I mean, it wasn't just that he wanted to make a unique character. He was also trying to emphasize how different Tudor society was.
Yeah.
And so through Shardlake's eyes,
Right.
we experience the prejudice, the limitations,
Yeah.
but also the unexpected opportunities that came with being different.
Right.
And so he becomes kind of this moral compass for us,
Right.
navigating a world where the line between right and wrong was constantly shifting.
Yes, and I think that's what makes him so relatable to the reader,
Yes.
as a character. Because he's flawed.
He's not a superhero.
He is, trying to do his best.
Yeah.
Under very difficult circumstances.
Absolutely.
And as a reader, you get to watch him
Yes.
grow and change.
Grow and change, grapple with these complexities of the moral world that he's living in.
And it's interesting how Sansom lets us, as the readers, in on the secrets.
Yes.
We know what's coming.
Yeah.
But the characters don't.
Right.
And I'm thinking specifically of,
Yeah.
Catherine Howard,
Right.
who's so young and vibrant,
Yes.
but walking blindly towards her fate.
Yeah, it's almost like watching a play where you've read the program ahead of time
Yeah.
and you know who the villain is from the start,
Right.
but you're watching everybody else on stage
Right.
act out their parts,
Right.
not knowing what's coming. And it's just this incredible dramatic irony
Yeah.
that keeps you on the edge of your seat. You're
Wow.
just waiting for the inevitable to unfold.
And speaking of inevitable,
Yes.
Sansom really used the constantly shifting landscape of faith under Henry VIII to fuel the suspense of these novels.
Oh, he did. He did it. I mean, it was almost like a character in and of itself.
Right.
The religious climate.
Yeah, one minute you're a devout Catholic,
Yeah.
the next you're a heretic, and your life is forfeiting.
Exactly. And it wasn't just, he wasn't just throwing that in there as a plot device.
Right.
He was really trying to weave these complex theological debates
Right.
into the story and
Yeah.
make them accessible and even thrilling in a way.
Right.
You're learning about, transubstantiation
Yeah.
while you're trying to figure out who poisoned the archbishop.
It's amazing how he blended those details of,
Mhm.
religious doctrine into a whodunit.
Yes. He was a master at taking what could have been very dry historical facts and making them visceral
Yeah.
and immediate.
And I think that's why the Tudor era just lends itself so well to historical fiction.
It does.
It's got everything.
It's got the larger-than-life monarchs.
Yes.
It's got the political intrigue.
Yes.
A healthy dose of scandal.
Oh, yes. I mean,
Plenty of scandal.
what more could you ask for in a story?
And for us in the West,
Yeah.
There's a certain familiarity to it, I think. You know, we can see ourselves in their struggles with power and faith and identity, even though they were living in a vastly different context.
Yes. And, Sansom wasn't afraid to experiment within this genre either.
Yeah. No, he wasn't.
I mean, he would take on these locked room mysteries like in Darkfire.
Right.
Where it's like a seemingly impossible murder.
Yeah.
And then he would go to, a serial killer thriller.
Yeah, with Heartstone.
Heartstone.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the plots that were evolving.
Right.
I mean, Sansom's writing.
Yes.
I mean, if you compare the early books to the later books, you can see how much he grew.
He did.
As a writer.
Yeah.
He was more confident in his craft.
Right. He was willing to play with different narrative structures and, experiment with point of view.
Right.
And really kind of deepen the emotional resonance of his stories.
Right. And speaking of that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have to talk about the Disney adaptation of Dissolution.
Yes, we do.
Which has just been lauded for its casting.
And particularly the actor who plays Shardlake.
Yeah. They did a really good job capturing his.
Did you really believe
Yeah.
that this is a man who sees the world differently,
Actually,
who has these physical limitations but
Right.
refuses to let them define him?
Right. And visually, it's stunning.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's a really, really good recreation of Tudor England.
Yeah. They really did a good job.
Although I've heard some critiques about its use of exposition.
Oh, really?
Where, Shardlake's talking aloud to himself to explain certain plot points.
Oh, that's interesting because that technique,
Yeah.
while it might seem a bit heavy-handed on screen,
Right.
it's something that Sansom did in the books.
Yeah.
He would often use Shardlake's internal monologues to convey information or guide the reader.
Right.
And, some readers did find that a bit clunky, even in the books.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how those techniques translate differently from page to screen.
Yeah. One thing that I always found interesting was his portrayal of Thomas Cromwell.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's so different
It is very different.
than Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall.
Right.
Which is maybe, the more popular interpretation of Cromwell.
All right.
But Sansom's Cromwell, which predates Mantel's version,
Right.
is actually much more menacing.
He's this master manipulator.
Yeah.
He's got this charm.
Yeah.
But he's also absolutely ruthless.
Yeah.
And he really is this Machiavellian advisor. He's whispering in the king's ear and orchestrating the downfall of anyone who stands in his way.
Yeah. And Sean Bean, I think, really captures that duality.
Oh, he does.
In the series.
He does.
He really embodies that historical perception of Cromwell as this ruthless and powerful figure.
Yes, whereas Mantel's Cromwell, while still a very complex character, is presented much more sympathetically.
Yeah.
We see his vulnerability. We see his loyalty to his family and friends.
Right.
And, it's a more nuanced portrayal, which makes sense, considering that Mantel is focusing on Cromwell's rise and how he helped shape Henry's reign.
Yeah, so you've got these two authors who are both masters of historical fiction.
Yes.
Giving us very different interpretations of the same historical figure.
Yeah.
And it just reminds us that history is not this simple, objective narrative.
No, it isn't.
It really is open to interpretation.
It is.
And shaped by the perspectives of those who tell the story.
That's right. And, Sansom's Henry VIII is also quite different.
Yeah.
From other portrayals that we often see.
Yeah.
He's not the central character in the books.
No.
But he is this looming presence.
Right. He's almost like a force of nature.
A force of nature. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. We rarely see him directly.
Right.
But we feel his influence in every scene.
Yeah.
The hushed whispers of the courtiers.
Yeah.
The ever-present threat of his displeasure.
Exactly. And I think that's such a clever choice by Sansom because it reflects the reality of Shardlake's position.
Right.
As a lawyer, he wouldn't have had constant access to the king.
Right.
So we experience Henry through this lens of fear and awe that he inspires in others.
And so it adds this layer of authenticity to Sansom's world building.
Yeah, it does. It's so subtle.
Right.
But so effective in conveying the power dynamics of the Tudor court.
Right.
I mean, you understand that even those closest to power, even someone like Cromwell, were never truly safe. It was a place of constant intrigue where allegiances shifted like the tides.
And the most powerful figures could just fall from grace.
Absolutely.
In an instant.
Right. And that kind of begs the question, how did he manage to pack all this, historical detail and these complex characters and plots into these 600-page novels? I know.
And still make them a captivating read.
I know. It's really a testament to his skill as a storyteller.
Yeah, you'd think they would be intimidating.
Right.
But he makes those pages fly by.
He does, and it's because he blends those details so seamlessly into the narrative.
Right.
He doesn't overwhelm you with exposition.
Right.
He trusts you to keep up, to make the connections, and to just get swept up in the story.
Yeah.
And of course, we talked about that dramatic irony, which is just a masterclass in keeping people engaged.
And so when you think about his legacy, I mean, he clearly had a profound impact.
Oh, absolutely.
On historical fiction, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, he brought this whole new level of depth and sophistication to the genre.
Right.
You know, he showed us that you could write a thrilling mystery that was also deeply researched, intelligently written, and emotionally resonant.
Right.
I mean, he proved that history could be both entertaining and intellectually stimulating. And I think he inspired a whole generation of writers to follow in his footsteps, you know, to kind of pick up the torch and run with it.
Right.
You know, one thing that I think is really interesting about Sansom's work is his portrayal of women.
Oh, yeah.
In Tudor England.
Right.
I mean, it would have been so easy to fall into those stereotypes, to diminish their roles.
Right.
But he really gives his female characters agency and depth, even within the constraints of the time.
Right. He really acknowledges the limitations that they faced.
Yeah.
But he doesn't just make them victims of circumstance, you know? You know, they're intelligent.
Yeah.
They're resourceful.
Yeah.
And even influential at times.
Yes. And I think what the experts are saying is that he manages to find that balance.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't shy away from portraying the realities of women's lives in Tudor England.
Right.
But he also gives them a voice, allows their strength and complexity to shine through.
And they're not just, you know, background figures.
Yeah.
They're actually driving the plot.
Yeah.
You know, impacting decisions.
Yes.
Challenging the norms of their society.
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder.
Yeah.
You know, how much Sansom's own background influenced his writing.
Right.
I mean, before he became an author, he was a solicitor.
He was, and deeply involved in political and social activism.
Right.
And I think you see that in Shardlake.
Right.
You know, that legal mind.
Right.
That unwavering belief in the law, even when it's flawed.
Right.
That's clearly coming from Sansom's background. And you can see echoes of his activism in the social commentary that's woven throughout the series.
It's like he's not afraid to explore these issues of injustice and inequality.
No.
Even though it's a historical setting.
Exactly.
And that's really evident, I think, in his last novel, Tomland.
Yes.
Where he's dealing with this social rebellion against some of the harsher aspects of Tudor rule.
Yeah.
And he really uses that historical crime to explore these themes of power and justice and individual rights.
He does. And I think what that reminds us is that Sansom was doing more than just entertaining his readers. Right. He was challenging them to think critically about the past and, by extension, the present.
Yeah.
You know, to consider how these timeless struggles for fairness and equality continue to resonate.
Yeah. And you know, we talk about challenging readers.
Yeah.
I mean, he really meticulously researched these books.
Oh, he did.
I mean, the guy wrote academic articles on the Tudor era.
He did.
But at the same time, he knew that a good story couldn't be bogged down by too much detail.
Exactly. The experts say, you know, he was just a master at weaving those details into the plot without overwhelming you.
Right.
He knew when to use exposition, when to let the story unfold naturally, and when to rely on that dramatic irony to keep you hooked.
Yeah. And sometimes you read historical fiction and you feel like you're reading a textbook disguised as a novel.
Yes, exactly.
But with Sansom, it always felt very organic.
It did.
Like you were transported back in time.
It's like you could smell the streets of Tudor London.
Yeah.
Feel the tension of the court.
Right.
Hear the clash of swords in a tavern brawl.
He just really brought that world to life.
He did. He was a master of immersive storytelling.
Yeah.
And you know, speaking of endings.
Yeah.
It's a real loss for readers.
Yeah.
That he passed away while he was working on his 8th Shardlake novel.
Right.
You know, that unfinished story is a constant reminder of how fragile life is.
It is sad, you know, because we were all so eager to see where Shardlake's journey would take him next.
Right.
But then again, I guess it makes us appreciate
Yes.
those 7 completed novels even more.
It does?
What a remarkable achievement.
Absolutely.
A testament to his dedication to his craft.
Yes.
And his deep love of history.
And, his legacy extends
Yeah.
far beyond those 7 books.
Right.
He inspired countless other writers to explore this world of historical crime fiction.
Yeah.
You can see his influence in the works of so many contemporary authors.
Yeah, he really raised the bar.
He did.
And showed that you can write a gripping mystery.
Yeah.
That's also deeply researched.
Yes.
Intelligently written.
Yes.
And emotionally resonant.
That's right.
It really makes you think, how many readers probably discovered a passion for history?
Oh, yeah.
Through his books.
Absolutely.
He wasn't just writing entertainment. He was opening up this window to another time.
Right.
And sparking this curiosity about a world that they may not have known anything about.
And that's so important, especially in a world where history is often seen as this dusty, irrelevant subject that's just confined to textbooks.
Right.
He was reminding us that history is made up of stories, stories of real people who lived and loved and struggled with challenges that we can still relate to.
Yeah. And he brought those struggles to life.
He did.
Through his characters.
Yeah.
We experience that fear of religious persecution.
Yes.
The weight of societal expectations. The yearning for justice in a world where power often trunks fairness.
Absolutely.
And he made us feel those emotions, even though we're centuries removed from the events themselves.
I think by connecting us to those human experiences, he was really helping us understand that the past isn't just this collection of dates and facts. It's actually, a wellspring of knowledge about ourselves, about human nature, about these enduring themes that connect us across time.
And speaking of themes, the experts brought up this really interesting point about historical accuracy versus creative license in historical fiction. Where do you draw the line? Between staying true to the historical record and crafting a compelling narrative.
It is a tightrope walk, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you have this responsibility to the past to represent it with integrity and respect.
Right.
But you're also writing a story, not a textbook.
Right.
You need to create characters that feel real.
Right.
Plots that engage, emotions that resonate. And sometimes that requires you to take some liberties with the historical record.
And I think Sansom did a really good job with that.
He did. I mean, he clearly knew his history inside and out.
Right.
But he wasn't afraid to make choices that served the story, even if it meant deviating slightly from the established facts.
Right.
Yeah.
He understood that sometimes to really get to the heart of a historical moment, you need to go beyond just the documented events.
Right.
And explore the motivations.
Yeah.
The emotion.
The human drama that lies beneath the surface.
He found a way to make history both accurate and engaging.
Yes.
Informative and entertaining.
He did.
And that's a real skill.
It is.
And I think that's what great historical fiction is all about.
Yeah.
It's transporting us to another time and place.
Yes.
Making us feel like we're right there in the thick of it.
Right.
But also reminding us of the enduring power of the human spirit.
Yes.
It's an escape.
Yeah.
But it's also a journey of discovery.
It is. And if you haven't already explored Sansom's world, I highly recommend you start with Dissolution.
Yeah.
It's the first book in the Shard Lake series.
Yeah.
And it's just a brilliant introduction to his captivating blend of history and mystery.
You'll be hooked, I promise you.
You will.
And as you delve into his world, I want to leave you with a thought. What responsibility do authors have to the past when crafting these compelling narratives? It's a question I don't think has any easy answers.
No.
But one that's worth considering.
Yeah.
As you immerse yourself
Absolutely.
in C J Sansom's world.
Happy reading.
Until next time, keep diving deep.